I'm not going to tell you the drought was preparing you. That's what people always say, and it lands like a stone thrown at an open wound. Preparation implies you weren't ready. It implies the waiting was a classroom, and you were the student who needed more time. I've been watching this long enough to know that's not what I see. What I see is someone who's been locked out of a house they already paid for. So let's put that language down. Pick up something sharper. What if the years of financial bottleneck weren't a test of your worth, but a kind of containment built around your inheritance? A wall erected because the systems governing your life could see something you couldn't. You were surrounded by people who would have weaponized your overflow, family structures that measured your value by what they could take. Partners who mistook your empathy for an open door, one they could walk through whenever they needed something. The wealth was already allocated. The routing number was already assigned. But the delivery address wasn't safe, and so the release was withheld with a precision that felt like neglect, because you can't deliver something irreplaceable into a perimeter that hasn't been cleared. That's not punishment. That's asset protection. So the door stayed locked, not because you were unworthy, because you were still standing in a burning building, holding the hands of people who refused to leave. There's a specific image I keep coming back to, a door left open. I don't know whose door. I don't know where it leads or whether someone walked through it or walked away. I just see it, standing ajar, no one in the frame. I'm not going to offer you the old reassurances. The words that get handed around like candy at a funeral. They've been emptied by overuse, and they don't belong here. What I will tell you is this: the wall around your inheritance has been removed. The system is settling an account that has been accruing interest for longer than you want to think about. The escrow isn't just opening, it's emptying itself into your life so completely that when you feel it, you won't recognize it as a breakthrough. You'll recognize it as a collapse, the exact shape of years of withheld abundance folding into a single window of time. But before we get there, a question is hanging in that open doorway, and it's the only one that matters right now. I'm going to let it sit between us for a moment. Why did the escrow unlock today, of all days? Pause. We build a life on top of the life we actually want. That's what we learn to do. We get up. We go through the motions. We maintain the structure everyone around us can see, the resume, the rent, the polite answer when someone asks how things are going. We keep it presentable, functional, so intact that no one would ever know we're running a completely different life underneath. In the dark, on our own fuel, that second life is where the real work lives. No one applauds it. No one signs off on it. It doesn't appear anywhere official, and it's never once been validated by anyone who had authority over us. And yet it's the only life we've ever been fully alive inside. You know which one I mean. The friction comes when the lower life surfaces and you have to push it back down. You're in a meeting, you're at a dinner. Someone asks what you do, and what comes out is the upper life answer, the one they can digest. And underneath that answer, like a second heartbeat, the other life pulses once, hard, and goes quiet. You feel it, nobody else does. You file it back where it lives, and you exhale. That moment costs something, every single time. And no one around you is paying that bill. You've been holding both lives up simultaneously for so long that the exhaustion has stopped feeling like exhaustion. It just feels like you. But here's what changed. The wall didn't come down because you smashed through it. It came down because the people on the other side, the ones who needed your overflow to prop up their own emptiness, finally lost interest, or you finally stopped answering, or both. The perimeter cleared, and the forces governing that withheld release, which don't negotiate and don't explain themselves, updated the delivery address the moment it was safe to do so. So the escrow unlocked. And yet, even as I say those words, part of you feels your shoulders tighten, because you've heard this before. You felt the shift in the air, the stirring, only to watch the provision pull back like a tide receding from a shore you were already walking toward, leaving you standing on wet sand with nothing in your hands. That cycle has carved something into you, and right now the old wiring is asking, why is this time different? You're living a contradiction, the account is settling, and your body is bracing for the drought to resume, because scarcity is what you know how to survive. Abundance is a language you've never been allowed to speak fluently. That's the tension I need you to hold as we move into what comes next. But don't rush past what I'm about to say. You've known since you were young that the world wasn't seeing what you were seeing. Not in a grandiose way, not the kind of knowing that makes someone stand on a chair and announce themselves. More like walking into a room and realizing everyone else is reading from a script you were never handed, laughing at lines that don't land, nodding at conclusions that don't follow. And for a long time, you assumed the problem was yours, that you'd missed the orientation somehow, that the instructions existed, clearly printed, in some file you'd simply never received. But that was never what was happening. What was happening was that you were operating on a different frequency in a room full of people who had all agreed to pretend they were receiving the same signal, and your body knew it before your mind had words for it. I want you to register that. Not as a concept, as something you feel when I say it out loud. You've known since you were young that the world wasn't seeing what you were seeing. Not in a grandiose way. Not in the way that makes someone stand on a chair and announce themselves. More like walking into a room and realizing everyone else is reading from a script you were never handed, laughing at lines that don't land, nodding at conclusions that don't follow. And for a long time, you assumed the problem was yours, that you'd missed some orientation somewhere. That in a file you never received, the instructions were printed out clearly, and you'd simply never gotten them. But that was never what was happening. What was happening was that you were operating on a different frequency in a room full of people who had all agreed to pretend they were receiving the same signal, and your body knew it before your mind had language for it. Not as a concept, as something you feel in your bones when someone finally says it out loud. The others weren't trying to exclude you. They genuinely could not perceive what you were perceiving. There's a loneliness that doesn't come from being alone. You've been alone in a crowd since childhood by now, that's just your native atmosphere. But this is a different loneliness, the kind that settles in your chest when you try to explain something true to someone who loves you, someone who genuinely wants to understand, and you watch their face while the words leave your mouth and realize they're getting the shape of what you're saying, but not the weight. They nod. They tell you they hear you. And you know, with a clarity that aches, that it didn't land. That loneliness isn't a wound, it's a diagnostic. It tells you that what you carry can't be passed through the standard channels. It needs a receiver tuned to the same frequency. And those receivers are rare. They always have been, which is why you stopped trying to explain yourself a long time ago. You didn't make a decision about it. You just watched, over years, as the cost of explaining kept outpacing the return, and something in you, wiser than your conscious mind, started conserving that energy for other things. Now let me turn toward you directly. Because this is the part where the doubt enters. You've been sitting with a question you're afraid to voice. I'm going to voice it for you. The question is this: if I'm truly one of the ones who came here to carry something, if I'm actually meant to break these patterns, shift something real, then why has my life been so relentlessly hard? Why have the doors that opened for everyone else stayed locked for me? Why has the money been so tight, the recognition so sparse, the ease so absent? If I'm chosen, why does my life look like evidence of the opposite? That's not an accusation. That's a legitimate question. And if no one has ever let you ask it without rushing to reassure you, let me be the one who doesn't rush. The difficulty was structural. It wasn't a verdict on your worth. It was the consequence of carrying a frequency that the structures around you were never built to hold. Think of an electrical current running through wiring that was never designed to handle that kind of voltage. The current doesn't stop being powerful. The wiring shorts. The lights flicker, the system complains, and the person standing in the room thinks the problem is the current when the problem was always the infrastructure. You've been trying to run your frequency through systems built for something lower. The financial systems, the relational ones. The professional gateways. They shorted, not because something was wrong with you, but because what you carry couldn't move through conduits that narrow. So let me tell you what that looked like for me. Because I've lived inside the same wiring, the same voltage, and I know the exact shape of the floor when you hit it. For 19 months, there was a stillness in my life that felt like erasure. I was living in a single rented room on the east side of the city, the one with the window that faced the brick wall of the building next door. I'd lost the only work that had ever felt like my own. A consulting practice I'd built over 7 years. The client list, the referrals, the reputation, all of it gone in about 8 weeks. The last client pulled out the morning I was supposed to sign. I sat in the parking lot of a coffee shop on Pine Street with the contract still on the passenger seat and the phone still warm in my hand, and I didn't have the energy to turn the ignition. That was the flaw. Pause. 19 months of a door that didn't open. 19 months of watching the balance in my checking account drop until I stopped looking. 19 months of waking up in that room with the brick wall filling the window and having no answer to the question of why I was still there, except the one I couldn't bring myself to say out loud. That maybe the frequency I thought I carried wasn't real. That maybe I'd been wrong about all of it. That maybe the call had never come, and I'd only imagined it because the alternative was too empty to face. That was the flaw, and I learned there that the flaw isn't where you lose your faith. It's where your faith stops being a theory and becomes the only surface left to stand on. Now here's where it begins to turn. The people who left, some of them were removed. Not by you. Not even by circumstance in the ordinary sense. They were withdrawn from your environment because they couldn't survive the frequency that was coming. They sensed it before you did. They felt something shift in the atmosphere, and their systems, built for something lower, rejected it. And they exited. Often without explanation. Often in ways that left you going back over everything, trying to figure out what you'd done wrong. You'd done nothing wrong. You had increased the voltage, and what cannot carry the voltage must leave. That's the architecture underneath the abandonment. That's why the isolation has been so thorough. It wasn't arbitrary. It was precise. The palms of your hands are warmer than they used to be. You may not have noticed yet, or you may have noticed and let it pass. Pause. Don't let it pass. You hadn't done anything wrong. You increase the voltage. And what can't carry that voltage, it leaves. That's what's underneath the abandonment. That's why the isolation has felt so complete. It wasn't random. It was precise. The palms of your hands are warmer than they used to be. You may not have noticed yet. Or maybe you noticed and brushed it off. Don't brush it off. There's something I haven't told you yet, and I'd ask you to stay close for this part. At a certain point, I'm going to tell you what all of this actually looks like when it arrives. Not in metaphor, not as a principle, in the real, physical markers that show up when things begin to move, when what's been held starts to be released. I saved that part deliberately. because it's the part that makes everything else land. The part you'll be able to recognize when it comes. So here we are. What was held in the dark is settling in the light now. The only question that remains isn't whether it arrives, it's whether you can receive it without flinching. You've lived inside the cage long enough that the bars became invisible. And when the door finally swings open, the first impulse isn't to walk out. The first impulse is to pace, to test the edges, to wonder if it's real or if it'll close the moment you move toward it. Don't pace the cage. The body doesn't distinguish between a threat and a long-awaited resolution. Both feel like activation. Both fire the same alarm system you've been running on for years. And if you greet this with the old vigilance, the scanning, the bracing, the waiting for something to go wrong, you won't be able to hold what's coming. You're not being asked to believe anything. You're being asked to sit still. To treat yourself like a vessel quietly docked in calm water. Nothing is required except this: stay unbothered while things complete. In the next 48 hours, there's a warm, settled feeling that will move into the palms of your hands. Some of you are already feeling it. Pause, that's not nothing. That's the body signaling that it's ready to receive. And I want to leave you with one image. A door, not the one that was locked. This one is open, fully open. And beyond it there's no landscape yet, just light so dense it almost looks solid. It's not asking you to run toward it, it's asking you to walk, fully open. And beyond it there's no landscape yet, just light so dense it almost looks solid. It's not asking you to run toward it. It's asking you to walk,